My stepkids didn't know I could hear them through the baby monitor they forgot was on. I was folding laundry in the basement when I heard Chloe's voice come through the baby monitor receiver sitting on the dryer, clear as day, like she was standing right next to me. Did you see her face when Dad said we're spending Christmas at her mom's? She looked like she was going to cry. Laughter followed. High and cruel. 17-year-old Chloe and her 15-year-old brother Nathan, my stepchildren for the past 3 years, talking in Nathan's room where we'd set up the monitor 6 months ago when their grandmother stayed over after her hip surgery. Nobody remembered to take it down. I stood perfectly still, a pair of my husband Derek's jeans in my hands, listening to my stepkids discuss me like I was some kind of intruder in their lives. Nathan's voice came through next. She tries so hard to make us like her. It's pathetic. More laughter. My heart hammered against my ribs. 3 years of making their favorite meals, driving them to practices and appointments, helping with homework, attending every single school event. 3 years of telling myself that the coldness would eventually thaw if I just kept showing up, kept trying, kept loving them even when they gave me nothing back. Chloe's voice dropped to a whisper, but the monitor picked it up perfectly. Mom says we just have to hold out 2 more years until I'm in college. Then we can basically ignore her. Dad will choose us over her if we make him pick. Nathan said something I couldn't quite catch, then Chloe again. Are you kidding? She's not going to last. Mom gives her maybe another year before Dad realizes he made a mistake. Remember Danielle? She lasted what? 8 months? They both laughed, and I felt something crack inside my chest. Danielle had been Derek's girlfriend before me, someone the kids had apparently tortured until she left. Derek always said Danielle couldn't handle the responsibility of being with a single father. Now I understood what really happened. The monitor went silent for a moment, then Nathan spoke again. Did you plant the thing yet? Chloe's response made my blood go cold. Yeah. In her bathroom cabinet, Mom said to wait until after the holidays, then accidentally let Dad find it. He'll lose his mind. I stood frozen in the basement, Derek's jeans falling from my hands onto the concrete floor. What thing? What were they planning? I climbed the stairs slowly, my legs shaking, and walked into our bedroom. Derek was at work, wouldn't be home for another 3 hours. I went into our bathroom and opened the cabinet where I kept my toiletries. Behind my face wash and moisturizer, I found a small orange prescription bottle. The label said oxycodone, prescribed to a Jennifer Whitmore at a pharmacy I'd never been to. My hands trembled as I opened it. The bottle was half full of white pills. I'd never seen this before in my life. I stood there staring at the pills, understanding crashing over me in waves. They were going to make it look like I had a drug problem. They were going to plant evidence and let Derek discover it, probably stage some intervention or crisis that would end my marriage. 3 years of careful planning and patience from their mother, using her children as weapons against the woman who'd replaced her. I heard footsteps upstairs and quickly shoved the bottle back where I'd found it, my heart racing. I had to think. I had to be smart about this. That evening at dinner, I watched them differently. Chloe helped set the table without being asked, smiling at me sweetly. Nathan actually answered my question about his English project with more than a grunt. Derek noticed and squeezed my hand under the table, his eyes warm with pride that his kids were finally coming around. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab him right there and drag him downstairs to listen to that monitor, make him hear what his precious children really thought of me. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the way they'd perfected their performance, the years of practice they'd had manipulating him, or maybe it was the realization that if I confronted them now, without real proof, they'd just deny everything. It would be their word against mine, and Derek had already proven over 3 years that he'd always take their side in any conflict. He called it protecting his kids from feeling replaced. I called it enabling their cruelty. After dinner, Chloe volunteered to help me with dishes. She stood next to me at the sink, drying plates and chatting about her chemistry class like we were friends, like she hadn't been plotting my destruction an hour ago. I went to bed that night lying next to Derek, listening to him snore softly, wondering how to tell him that his children were being weaponized by his ex-wife Lydia, had been a presence in our marriage from day one, always calling with some emergency that required Derek's immediate attention, always scheduling things for the kids that conflicted with our plans, always making subtle comments about how hard it must be for them to accept another woman in their father's life. Derek thought she was being a good co-parent, keeping communication open. I'd thought she was being possessive and manipulative. Turns out we were both right, but I'd vastly underestimated how far she'd go. The next morning, I made breakfast while Chloe and Nathan got ready for school. They came down dressed and ready, backpacks on, performing their roles perfectly. Chloe thanked me for making pancakes, her favorite. Nathan actually made eye contact when he said goodbye. Derek beamed at them, then at me, his face full of hope that we were finally becoming a real family. I smiled back and watched them leave, then went straight to the basement with my phone. I sat on the cold concrete steps and called my best friend Rachel, who was a family law attorney. She answered on the second ring. I told her everything. The monitor, the conversation, the pills in my bathroom. Rachel was quiet for a long moment, then said, "Don't touch those pills again. Don't move them. Don't throw them away. Definitely don't take them to confront anyone and start documenting everything." She explained that planted evidence was serious, that parental alienation was real, and that I needed to be very careful about how I handled this. She said to keep listening to the monitor, to record anything relevant, and to start building a case before I said anything to Derek. Because once I opened this door, there would be no going back. My marriage would either survive this revelation or it wouldn't, and I needed to be prepared for both outcomes. I spent the rest of the day in a fog, going through the motions of my life while my mind raced. At noon, I drove to an electronics store and bought a digital recorder that could connect to the baby monitor's frequency. I set it up in the basement, hidden behind the dryer, programmed to record whenever the monitor activated. Over the next week, I collected evidence. The recorder captured 3 more conversations between Chloe and Nathan. In one, they discussed how their mother had promised to increase their allowances if they could drive me out before summer. In another, Nathan complained that pretending to like me was exhausting, and Chloe told him to think of it as acting practice. The third conversation was the worst. Chloe talking about how their mother had a whole plan mapped out, starting with the pills, then moving on to making it look like I was stealing money from Derek's account, then finally staging some kind of mental breakdown that would make me look unstable. They talked about it like it was a game, like I was just an obstacle to remove rather than a person who'd loved them and tried to be there for them. I listened to those recordings in my car, parked in grocery store parking lots, crying so hard I couldn't breathe. Every kind word I'd spoken, every meal I'd cooked, every game I'd attended, it all meant nothing to them. I was just the woman who wasn't their mother, and no amount of effort would ever change that. I started watching Lydia differently too. She came by the house every few days, always with some reason to see Derek or the kids. She was pretty in a sharp way, with perfectly styled blonde hair and expensive clothes, always looking like she'd just come from or was heading to something important. She'd smile at me with her mouth but not her eyes, asking how I was doing in a tone that suggested she already knew the answer and found it amusing. Once, she even complimented my outfit while I was wearing old jeans and a sweatshirt, the kind of compliment designed to make you feel worse about yourself. Derek never saw it because he was too busy trying to keep the peace, to make sure Lydia felt respected as the mother of his children. What he didn't see was that Lydia didn't want peace. She wanted me gone and was willing to turn her children into little soldiers in her war. I thought about confronting her directly, showing up at her pristine townhouse and playing the recordings, letting her know I was onto her scheme. But Rachel's voice echoed in my head. Document everything. Be patient. Build an airtight case. 2 weeks into my secret recording project, I captured something that changed everything. It was a Saturday afternoon. Derek had taken the kids to see their grandmother, and I'd stayed home claiming a headache. Really? I wanted time to listen to the latest recordings, but around 3 p.m., the monitor activated. I heard Lydia's voice coming through, sharp and clear. She must have come by the house, probably using the key Derek still let her have for emergencies. Nathan, help me look through her things. I need to find bank statements or anything that shows she's spending Derek's money irresponsibly. My whole body went cold. She was in my house, going through my belongings. I grabbed my phone and opened the security camera app I'd installed last month. Derek thought it was for package theft prevention. Really, I'd wanted to document any intrusion, any evidence of the campaign against me. The cameras showed Lydia in our bedroom, Nathan with her, going through my dresser drawers. Chloe was standing by the door as lookout. I recorded the security footage on my phone while the baby monitor picked up Lydia's voice giving instructions. Look for receipts, anything expensive. We need to build a narrative that she's bleeding him dry. I sat in my car in the driveway, watching on my phone as Lydia and my stepkids ransacked my bedroom. She went through my closet, my nightstand, my jewelry box. She took photos of a necklace Derek had given me for our anniversary, probably planning to use it as evidence of my expensive tastes. Nathan found the credit card statements Derek and I kept in a desk drawer and photographed each page. Chloe kept checking her phone, presumably tracking her father's location to make sure he didn't come home early. The casual efficiency of it was staggering. This wasn't their first operation. They'd been doing this for a while, collecting information, building their case against me piece by piece. I watched Lydia pause at a photo on my nightstand, one of Derek and me from our honeymoon in Maine. She picked it up, looked at it for a long moment, then deliberately placed it face down before moving on. That small gesture told me everything I needed to know about the depth of her hatred. After 20 minutes, they left. I waited in my car until I saw Lydia's white SUV pull away, then went inside to assess the damage. Everything looked normal at first glance, but I could see the small signs of intrusion. My jewelry box wasn't quite closed all the way. The desk drawer wasn't pushed in completely. The photo frame was still face down. I took pictures of everything, documenting the evidence of their search. Then I went to the basement and reviewed the monitor recordings from the afternoon. Lydia's voice came through crystal clear, giving instructions, making comments about my taste, my belongings, my life. At one point, she said, Derek was always too trusting. He didn't see through me, and he doesn't see through her either. But we're going to open his eyes. The way she said it made me realize this wasn't just about getting rid of me. This was about maintaining control over Derek through the children, about making sure no woman could ever successfully integrate into their family unit. I was just the latest target in a pattern that had probably destroyed other relationships before mine. Rachel had told me to build a case, but now I had more than a case. I had evidence of breaking and entering, of conspiracy, of parental alienation. I had enough to destroy Lydia legally and socially. That night at dinner, I watched Derek interact with his kids. He was so proud of them, so in love with the idea of them. Chloe made him laugh with some story from school. Nathan asked for advice on a project. They were good kids when they wanted to be, when they weren't being manipulated by their mother into being weapons. Part of me wanted to protect Derek from the truth, to spare him the pain of knowing his children had been turned against his wife. But a bigger part of me was tired of being the only one protecting anything in this marriage. I'd been protecting his feelings, protecting his relationship with his kids, protecting the fantasy that we could all be one happy family if I just tried hard enough. Meanwhile, nobody was protecting me. I decided that night that I was done being the martyr. I was done absorbing cruelty in silence. It was time for Derek to see what was really happening in his house, in his family, under his nose. After dinner, I asked Derek if we could talk privately. We went into our bedroom, and I closed the door. I could see him already preparing his, "The kids are trying, you need to be patient" speech. Instead, I pulled out my phone and played the first recording. Chloe's voice filled our bedroom. She tries so hard to make us like her. It's pathetic. Derek's face went through several expressions. Confusion, then recognition, then something that might have been pain. He started to say something, but I held up my hand and played the next clip. Nathan. Mom says we just have to hold out 2 more years. Another clip, Chloe. Mom said to wait until after the holidays, then accidentally let Dad find it. Derek sat down heavily on the bed, his face pale. I showed him the prescription bottle in our bathroom cabinet, explained I'd never seen it before. They mentioned planting something. I played the recording of Lydia in our house, going through our things. I showed him the security footage of his ex-wife and children invading our bedroom, photographing our financial documents, planning their campaign against me. With each piece of evidence, I watched something break in Derek's eyes. When I finished, he just sat there, staring at his hands. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. How long have you known? I told him 2 weeks. He asked why I waited, and I said I needed proof because I knew he wouldn't believe me without it. He flinched like I'd slapped him, but he didn't argue because we both knew it was true. Derek stood up and paced the room, his hands shaking. He picked up his phone 3 times and put it down again, clearly trying to decide who to call first. Finally, he left the bedroom and went downstairs. I followed and found him standing in the kitchen, staring at nothing. I need to talk to them, he said. Tonight, right now. I asked if he wanted me there and he shook his head. This is going to be ugly. I need you to know, whatever happens next, I believe you. I believe the evidence. And I'm sorry I made you collect it instead of just trusting you in the first place. His apology felt hollow after 3 years of choosing his kids over me in every conflict, but I accepted it with a nod. Derek called Chloe and Nathan into the living room. They came down looking cautious, probably sensing something was wrong. Derek didn't ease into it. He played the recordings right there, his phone on speaker, filling the room with their voices plotting against me. Watching their faces change was almost worth the pain of the past weeks. Chloe went white. Nathan looked at the floor. Neither of them denied it. They couldn't, not with their own voices as evidence. Derek's voice was cold in a way I'd never heard before. Start talking. Now. Everything. How long has this been going on? What else have you done? And I want to know exactly what your mother told you to do. Chloe tried the tears first, the ones that usually worked on Derek. Daddy, Mom said that she was, you don't understand how hard this has been for us. Derek cut her off. I understand that you've been lying to me for 3 years. I understand that you've been working with your mother to destroy my marriage. What I don't understand is why my children became people who could do something like this. Nathan finally spoke up, his voice defensive. You replaced Mom with her. You expect us to just accept some stranger in our lives? Mom said you weren't thinking clearly, that you needed help seeing the truth. Derek's face hardened further. Your mother has been using you as weapons. Do you understand that? She's turned you into people who plant drugs in someone's bathroom, who break into their bedroom and photograph their private documents. That's not protecting your family. That's criminal behavior. Chloe stood up, tears streaming down her face. We were protecting you. Mom said she's just using you for money, that she'll leave as soon as she can. I'd stayed silent until that moment, but something in me snapped. I have my own money, I said quietly. I'm a registered nurse. I make $60,000 a year. I don't need your father's money. Chloe looked at me like I'd started speaking another language. The idea that I might not be a gold digger had apparently never occurred to them. Nathan said, but Mom said you quit your job to live off Dad. I shook my head. I work 3 12-hour shifts at County Hospital. I'm not here during the day because I work nights. Your father knows this. Your mother apparently doesn't, or she does and lied to you about it. I watched comprehension dawn on their faces. The first crack in their mother's carefully constructed narrative. Derek pulled out his phone again, and this time he did make a call. Lydia, we need to talk. Tonight. Come to the house. He paused, listening. No, the kids will be here. This is a family meeting. Another pause. If you don't come, I'm filing for an emergency custody modification in the morning. Your choice. He hung up. 30 minutes later, Lydia arrived, her face carefully composed into concern. Derek, what's going on? You sounded upset. Derek didn't invite her to sit down. He just played the recordings, all of them, including the ones of her in our house. Lydia's composure cracked as she listened to her own voice giving instructions to search through my belongings. When the recordings finished, Derek said, "You've been using our children to try to destroy my marriage. You broke into my house. You conspired to plant drugs in my wife's bathroom. You've been coaching Chloe and Nathan to manipulate me for years." Lydia recovered quickly, her face arranging itself into something like offense. "Those recordings are illegal. You can't record people without their knowledge." Derek laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're in our house, on our security cameras going through our belongings. But sure, let's talk about what's legal." He turned to Chloe and Nathan. "Go upstairs. Now." They hesitated, looking at their mother, and Derek's voice turned sharp. "I said now." They left. Once they were gone, Derek turned back to Lydia. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stop using our children as weapons. You're going to enter family therapy, all four of you, or I'm taking this evidence to court and fighting for full custody." Lydia's mask finally fell away completely, revealing raw fury underneath. "You would take my children away from me over some recordings? Over her?" She pointed at me like I was something dirty. "She's not worth breaking up our family, Derek. You know that. The kids know that. Everyone knows that except you." Derek stepped between us, his body blocking Lydia's view of me. "She is my family. She's been my wife for 3 years. And you've spent those 3 years trying to destroy what we built. You don't get to do that anymore." Lydia's voice dropped to something cold and vicious. "The kids will never accept her. You're forcing them to pretend, and it's damaging them. What kind of father chooses some woman over his children's emotional health?" Derek's response was quiet but firm. "The kind who refuses to let his children be manipulated into hating someone who's done nothing but love them. You're the one damaging them, Lydia. You're teaching them that manipulation and cruelty are acceptable tools to get what you want. That ends tonight." Lydia looked between us, realizing she'd lost control of the situation. "You'll regret this," she said finally. "The kids will never forgive you for taking her side." Derek opened the front door. "Get out of my house. We'll discuss custody modifications through lawyers." Lydia left, and the silence after she was gone felt almost physical. Derek locked the door and leaned against it, his eyes closed. "I need to talk to the kids again," he said. "Alone first, then with you if they're willing. This is going to take time to fix." I nodded, though part of me wondered if it could be fixed at all. Derek went upstairs to Nathan's room. I could hear his voice through the ceiling, too muffled to make out words, but the tone was serious. He was up there for over an hour. When he came back down, his eyes were red. "Nathan admitted that Lydia has been planning this since before we got married. She never accepted our divorce. She thought if she waited long enough, I'd come back to her. When you came along and it got serious, she panicked and started involving the kids." He sat down heavily on the couch. "Chloe is older and she remembers when Lydia and I were together. She blames me for the divorce. Lydia used that blame, shaped it into something she could weaponize. Nathan just went along because he didn't want to disappoint his mom or his sister." Derek looked at me with exhausted eyes. "I failed you. For 3 years, I let them treat you like an intruder and told myself they'd come around eventually." I sat down next to him. "What happens now?" Derek took my hand. "Therapy. For the kids individually, for the kids with me, for all of us together eventually, and consequences. Real ones. Chloe and Nathan need to understand what they did was wrong, not just acknowledge it to avoid punishment." He paused. "I also need therapy, because clearly I've been enabling this by always putting the kids' feelings first and your needs second. That's not how marriage works." Over the next few weeks, the house felt like a war zone. Chloe barely spoke to anyone, retreating to her room except for mandated family therapy sessions. Nathan was more receptive, easier to reach, maybe because he was younger, or because he'd been less invested in his mother's campaign. The therapist, Dr. Ramona Yates, was blunt in a way I appreciated. She told Chloe directly that parental alienation was abuse, and that she'd been both victim and perpetrator. She told Derek he'd been a doormat, prioritizing avoiding conflict over protecting his wife. She told me I'd been enabling by accepting treatment I should have called out years ago. Nobody left her office feeling good, but we all left understanding the work ahead. Lydia fought the custody modification viciously, hiring an expensive lawyer who tried to make me look like the problem. But Derek's recordings were damning. The court appointed a guardian ad litem to interview everyone and make recommendations. Rachel represented me through the process, documenting every instance of Lydia's interference, every coached conversation the kids revealed in therapy. The gal's report was scathing toward Lydia, noting her clear pattern of parental alienation and manipulation. The judge modified custody to split more evenly, with requirements for Lydia to attend counseling focused on healthy co-parenting. She was furious, but compliant, probably because the alternative was losing more time with the kids. 3 months after the confrontation, Chloe finally agreed to have a conversation with me. We sat in the living room with Dr. Yates mediating. Chloe cried through most of it, admitting that she'd wanted me to leave because it would mean her parents might get back together. She'd built this fantasy in her head where my departure would heal her broken family, and Lydia had encouraged that fantasy because it served her purposes. Dr. Yates asked Chloe if she understood now that her parents' divorce had nothing to do with me, that I'd come into the picture 2 years after they'd separated. Chloe nodded, but you could see she was still processing, still working through years of poisoned thinking. Nathan's progress was faster. He started doing small things, asking if I needed help with dinner, actually responding when I asked about school. Derek noticed and made sure to acknowledge it, to show Nathan that treating me with basic respect was appreciated. One Saturday, Nathan came downstairs while I was making coffee and said, without being prompted, "I'm sorry for everything. I should have been better." I looked at this 15-year-old who'd been weaponized by his mother and asked, "Do you know why you're sorry, or are you just saying what you think I want to hear?" Nathan thought about it. "Both. Like, I know what we did was wrong. The pills, going through your stuff, all of it. But also, I think I'm sorry because you were trying this whole time and I didn't let you." I told him that was a good start, and that rebuilding trust would take time. He nodded and actually helped me make breakfast, and it felt like maybe, possibly, we were beginning to find our way out of the wreckage. Derek was different too, more present, more aware of dynamics he'd previously ignored. He stopped accepting Lydia's calls during our time together. He started checking with me before making plans that affected both of us. 6 months after everything exploded, we had our first family dinner that felt almost normal. Chloe told a funny story about her chemistry teacher, Nathan, asked me about a patient I'd mentioned from work. Derek looked around the table with something like relief on his face. We weren't fixed, not even close, but we were trying. After dinner, Chloe helped clear the table without being asked. As she scraped plates into the trash, she said quietly, "Mom's seeing someone. She told us last week." I wasn't sure what she wanted me to say to that, so I just nodded. Chloe continued, "She seems different. Less angry maybe, or angry at different things." She paused. I think she needed Dad to move on before she could. It was the most insight Chloe had shown into the whole situation, this acknowledgement that her mother's obsession with destroying my marriage had been about Lydia's inability to let go. The therapy was working, slowly, helping both kids separate their mother's needs from their own feelings. That night, Derek and I talked in bed about the future, about whether we wanted to try for a baby of our own, about whether the kids could handle that change. It felt significant that we could even have the conversation, that we'd survived the worst and were planning for more. A year after I'd heard that first conversation through the baby monitor, I took it down. Nathan was cleaning out his room for a donation run and found it tucked behind his dresser. He brought it downstairs, holding it like evidence, his face uncertain. "Do you want this?" I took it from him and looked at the small plastic device that had changed everything. Part of me wanted to keep it, a reminder of what we'd survived, but a bigger part wanted to move forward without physical reminders of the worst time in my marriage. "Throw it away," I said. Nathan nodded and tossed it in the trash bag. Such a small moment, but it felt like closure. Derek got a promotion that required more travel, and for the first time, I wasn't worried about leaving him alone with the kids. They'd proven through their actions over months that the campaign against me was over. Chloe was even planning to go to college in-state partially, she admitted in therapy, because she didn't want to miss seeing how our family continued to evolve. Lydia had become an occasional presence rather than a constant interference. Her new relationship apparently giving her something else to focus on besides destroying mine. The kids still saw her regularly, but they came home from those visits without the same poisoned energy they used to carry. Dr. Yates told us in one of our final sessions together that we'd done the hardest work many families never attempt, looking directly at dysfunction and choosing to change it. She said the key now was maintaining boundaries, continuing communication, and remembering that setbacks would happen. Nobody becomes a perfect family overnight, especially after years of damage. But we had tools now, and we had proven to each other that we could survive hard truths. 2 years after the baby monitor incident, Chloe graduated high school. At her graduation party, she gave a speech thanking her parents for their support, then paused and looked directly at me. "And thank you to Vanessa, who never gave up on us even when we gave her every reason to. I'm sorry it took me so long to see that you were trying to help, not replace anyone." It wasn't a Hollywood moment. Some relatives looked confused. Lydia's jaw was tight. But Derek reached over and squeezed my hand, and I felt Nathan bump my shoulder in solidarity. We were a family, weird and scarred and still figuring things out, but we were choosing each other now. All of us. And that made all the difference. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.